But so the idea for this webinar, it really came from clients like Adam. I have a lot of clients that are buying their first property, but when they do it, they tell me, oh, I have in mind that at some point I would like to invest in real estate. And so I thought it would be nice to tell people how I did it, because I've invested in real estate for the last 18 years. And it's not like I've got an enormous empire, but I have a portfolio that will allow me to send my kid to college and hopefully one day to retire. And so the day it started was when I went to my bank and my kid was just born, and I asked, how do I do to send my kid to college in 18 years? And so she went into her computer and started typing, okay, the date of today, and in 18 years, the kid needs to go to college, the rate of inflation, in-state tuition and all that. And she said, well, this is how much you're going to need to put aside. But at the time I was a designer, I was making, I don't remember, maybe $30,000. I don't remember. And my husband was a writer, and he was not making that much more than me. It was not a possibility. So I came home and I said, okay, we've got to find a plan, maybe buying a property, renting it, and the rent will cover for the mortgage. And when we're ready to send our kid to school, we'll just sell the house and hopefully it will pay for college. That was the beginning. Well, since then, I've bought a lot of properties, and I've actually gone from being a designer to becoming a realtor. So what I want to share with you is how I did it and the things that I think are important to become an investor. So first, since I started working in real estate, I've been following this person, Kevin Gillen. And Adam, I'm sure I've told you about this guy, Kevin Gillen. He's a senior research fellow at the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation. He's a professor of finance at Drexel University. And what he says at the beginning of his presentations for realtors, of course, is that the factors of health, of wealth, are education, marriage, and real estate ownership. And it's easy to understand why. Education, if you only have a high school degree, it's much tougher to go up in salary compared to having a 4-year or more degree. Marriage, I guess you could think that 2 incomes combined will cover a mortgage easier. And then real estate ownership is, instead of throwing your money out to pay for the rent, well, you're saving it and you're building equity by buying your property. So for me, when you buy real estate, I believe that you need to have a plan. You need to figure out why you want to do it. Is it for retirement? Is it for sending your kid to college? Or is it that you want to build a capital to do something at some point? So I have sold to a lot of clients that I've bought for different reasons, but one of the clients that I really adore is a single woman who has bought 3 properties so far. She's not 40 yet. And her reason was she wanted to build a capital to open a yoga retreat in the Caribbean. She's about to buy her 4th property, and she's well on her way, right, to get that done. So having a plan is important. Now, what are the different ways that exist to invest in real estate? There are plenty of ways, but the ones that I'm interested in talking about are buying and sitting on a property that you would purchase. So you buy your primary and you wait, and the property value, it fluctuates, but generally speaking, in Philadelphia, it has a tendency to go up. Or you flip, you buy a property, you fix it, and you sell it. I have never really done it. Like I've sold a property very quickly. It was not my intent originally, so I can't speak too much about it, but I can say that I think that the only way to flip correctly is you have to find a great deal. You have to find a property that is completely undervalued, and you need to have a great partner of a contractor or somebody like Adam who knows how to fix properties. And you have to keep in mind that there are lots of fees that are involved in the purchase and the sale. There's the real estate transfer tax. There's the cost of doing the entire job, maybe the commission of the person that's going to help you. So for me, like a flip is a much more dangerous operation than buying to rent, and that's what I have been doing mostly. So you buy a property and either you rent it or you turn it into an Airbnb. And if you do that, you've got to keep in mind that there are also some costs that are associated with it. You need to have a rental license, and there are always new rules and regulations you have to follow. They change constantly, so you've got to keep up with them. There's one that just started today, which is you need to get a new certification that there's no lead in your property. Okay, so this being said, it's like, who should be looking at purchasing real estate as an investment? Because you can invest your money in art, in gold, in stocks, and it really depends on where you are in your life, what you're trying to accomplish. So who should be buying an investment property? So the very first thing you've got to do is decide how much risk, what is the risk you are willing to take when you are purchasing. And some properties and some areas and some moments in the year may be riskier than others. So that's something that you have to take in consideration. And also keep in mind what's happening in the front of your life. If you have to send your kids to college very soon, you're not going to strap your cash into the purchase of a property. So, the first thing you need to do when you are thinking of investing in real estate is you need to make sure that you have an interest in what you are about to do, like a serious interest, because it's time consuming. It can be kind of stressful. And you also need to know that the person you're going to be working with, your realtor, has a good understanding of the business model that you are trying to follow, right? And what are the values that you want to use for your investment strategy? So that leads me to speak about where you should be investing. And so the slide that you're looking at right now shows you that a city is like a living organism. It evolves constantly, and you've got to understand that. Otherwise, you're not going to be buying in an area that will see some kind of an evolution that will be meaningful for your investment, right? So you see in 1776, most of the city was actually along the Delaware River because that was the main mean of communication. That's where the money was coming from with the boats. And then in 1876, you can see that the city is now starting to be modeled around like a plan, around the parks that are in the city. City Hall was going to be like left for a park. And then you see 2020, we now have neighborhoods. It stretches. It's a huge city. So where do you invest? And that, I think, is, to me, it's one of the most important questions that you have to have answered before you start looking. You should invest in the areas where you want to be part of that investment and in that community and maybe part of the change. So you've got to look at what is happening in the neighborhoods. So I got the chance to meet in like maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, a person who, his name was Alan Halpern, and he was the editor of the first weekly magazine in the country, which was a magazine in Philadelphia. And I went to meet him at his house, which was between 2nd and 3rd on Pine Street on the north side. You walked in and it was breathtaking. There was like an indoor courtyard. It rained in that indoor courtyard with like a Japanese maple that was absolutely gorgeous. The house was just stupendous, and he bought it for like a few $100s in the 50s, because in the 50s, Society Hill was, in the articles that I read, it was the slums. It was a really, really bad neighborhood, and it was actually one of the poorest neighborhood in the city. And in the 70s, it was one of the richest neighborhood in the city. So when you are looking today at investing, you've got to look at the map of the city and think, what is going on in the city? What are other people doing? And since I've started in real estate, I have noted that the neighborhoods that are going through dramatic changes, it starts with a brewery, with a pub, with a coffee shop, with something like that. So Northern Liberties, it has been Standard Tap. Johnny Brenda's Fishtown. The South Philly Tap Room has been New Bold. And so if you have never looked into it, I would recommend that you Google the name of John Longacre, because he is the guy who started the South Philly Tap Room and Sardine. And he is at the birth of this enormous change. And although he does say he doesn't do it for philanthropic reason, he is doing it having in mind bringing the best that he can for the whole neighborhood and keeping it as diverse as possible. And so it's really, if you want to invest in real estate, the conclusion of this is you've got to do your homework and you've got to know where is the action and where do I fit into that picture. And then what can I do? So for example, in my properties, the very first thing that I do is I order a tree from the city of Philadelphia, and I've planted plenty of trees, and it warms my heart every time that I drive by because I see them growing. And also what I do is I go and I talk to my neighbors on those properties, and I tell them it increases the beauty of the street, it creates shade, less air conditioning running all the time, and it increases the value of your property. Why not do it? Let's do it. And there are some streets in Philadelphia where you can see that an entire block decides to do it. So these are the things that you can do once you have decided where you want to invest and once you are in a property. So how do you finance your purchase? So I'm going to tell you how I did mine, which was a long time ago. I mean, it's been over a period of 18 years. And then Maura is going to tell you how you can do it today. Because the mortgage landscape changes all the time. But the idea is that you've got to be nimble with your finances, and you've got to take a little bit of risks, but it's just like for any other investment. And let me tell you, I've lost so much money in the stock market. So you've got to be nimble. So this is the way I did it. I bought my first property, which was $50,000 in Bella Vista, and it was a 100% shell. No electrical, no plumbing, no roof, nothing. So I took a 203K, which is it's like a loan that allows you to renovate your property. Did you take a 203K, Adam, or not?
No, I think I actually talked about it with Maura, but
yeah. Okay.
Wasn't.
So I took a 203K to buy my property for $110,000. So at that point, I have $160,000 in my property. When time came to buy my next property, I had put in place a home equity line of credit a long time prior because I had built some equity in my property, and because whenever I felt like I had that money there, I wanted to have access to it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I didn't want that money to be stuck in my property because there is, to me, zero stability in the employment world today. You can get laid off like that. There's no loyalty. So I opened a home equity line of credit, and one day I was showing a property to a client, and I told him, if you don't buy this house, I'm going to buy it. And that's what I did. I just used my home equity line of credit, and I bought this house. So I went back in my papers to tell you what I did. I bought my first house on Passyunk because I recommend to buy next to a park and to like corridors, commercial corridors. I bought it for $135,000. And I own it outright right now. After 8 years, I was able to pay it off. to pay it off. I can't remember how we did it, but we just did. We just paid it off. My second property, I was living here in Balakinwood, so I was in my second primary. And I had a friend who lost his job. He was let go, and he couldn't show stubs to be able to rent a property. So I refied my property to buy a house for him. And because the rates had gone down since the day I had bought my primary, I took some cash out, I bought a property, and I redid my kitchen. And at the end of all of this, I had my second investment property, I redid my kitchen, and my mortgage payment was pretty much the same. This was just juggling. It was just a question of timing. So when you want to buy a property, it's all about looking at the opportunities, time, and, I was helping my friend who couldn't have rented a house. It was really complicated. So here's my second property. And after that, my other properties, I had the funds to put 20% down without having to do anything because my two first properties were income producing. So my first property, I rent right now for $1,400 and I own it. My second property, I bought for $143,000. My mortgage is $800 and that includes everything. And I rent it for $1,400. So you can tell that there's money that is growing. My two last properties, I bought one for $89,000, I'm ashamed to say. And I make $1,200 on it. And my mortgage is $519. And the last one I just bought for $147,000. My mortgage is $718 and I make $1,100. Awesome. And so I'm at the point where these are income producing. And if I want to buy another one, I could, except that I'm at the point where I need to send my kid to college. And so my plan has worked because now to send my kid to college, I have 2 years that are saved. And then for the 2 last years of college, we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll sell a house, I will remortgage, I don't know, but I'm waiting for that next opportunity.
So for the home equity line of credit, do you have to have I assume you have to have at least 20% equity in the house.
Well, that's Maura is going to speak about all this. Do you want to take it from here, Maura, and explain how does it work today?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And I'll start with what Adam was asking about the home equity line of credit. So this is right now with COVID-19, we are probably in the strictest, most stringent lending guidelines. So I just want to start with, this is subject to change and it's subject to loosen back up. We are in a time where people are losing their jobs and people are having difficulties paying their mortgages. So everything has gotten super tight. So I do anticipate that if we talk a year down the road, it might change. In the past, you could get a home equity line of credit up to 95 or 100% of your primary residence combined loan to value, and a rental not quite as much. Today, it's a little bit more challenging to get a home equity line of credit on a rental, although I do have a credit union that does it up to 70% of the value. So today, you do have to have a lot of equity. That will change. This is cyclical. I've seen this change, and what happens is things get more stable. That number will change. So don't keep that as a hard stop in your head. You always want to double check. And if it's something I can't do, I can always connect you to somebody to say, hey, this credit union has a great product. This is who you want to call. So the home equity lines of credit are that one thing. I do recommend getting them, especially on your primary, as soon as you can. And I would say if you have an investment property or you're getting one, wait for it maybe to loosen, right? We're going to come out of COVID. We're going to get some stability, and then there will be a loosening on all of this. right now you're probably maxed at 80% on a primary, where again, it used to go to 95. What a lender's going to look at when you're going to get approved for a mortgage, right? 4 things: credit score, income. We're going to look at debt to income ratios, your assets, your employment. There's also going to be an appraisal. I know some people, as Cecile mentioned, might want to buy a shell. There's 203K loans. There's conforming construction loans. We're not really going to go into great detail on those today. However, they do exist that you can finance. It's not for everyone. Adam, if you're a handy kind of guy and you want to do some of the work, that's not the right product for you, because they don't allow you to do your own work.
Unless you are a GC.
They won't let you do that anymore. You can get somebody else, your buddy, to be a GC, but there's been some conflict that you are the general contractor, and is it all really legit? So again, with the tightening, you used to be able to be your own GC. Now you can't, but your buddy can be your own GC.
Okay.
No.
So as I said, some things have changed, and some things have, so the big thing is going to be building that equity, right? And how much can you tap? And, for someone who's looking to buy in the short term, these low interest rates are just amazing. Somebody who's trying to buy a primary residence, a 1 unit, they can do as little as 3% down in the twos. A 2 unit, you're going to be required today to put 15% down, which is an 85% loan to value, but you're still at a 2.99% interest rate today. It's amazing. 3 to 4 units are going to require 20 or 25% down, depending upon the program. Rates are still amazing. It's about a 3.125%, 3.25%. Now these are, and I know Cecile mentioned, all of this is if you live in one of the units. So these are for primary, but primary, you buy a 3 unit and you live in one, you're still able to call this a primary residence. It's a true investment property where you're not going to be living in one of the units. Those interest rates are going to change a little bit. The down payment numbers are going to change a little bit. With the 1 unit today, with COVID, guys, you've got to put 20% down. 2 to 4 units, you've got to put 25% down payment. Differentials in interest rates, a 1 unit's at about 3.5% interest rate. A 2 to 4 is about an 1/8 higher, but there's a point involved with that. Again, we're at our strictest point. If you get to 5 units plus, that is no longer considered a residential mortgage, and you need to get a commercial loan for that. So the sweet spot is that 2 to 4 units if you're looking at the multi-unit. Good rule of thumb is to keep the debt to income ratios at 45%. We don't need to go into all of that, but if anyone is looking and wants to run numbers, I can sort of run you through that.
All right. Thank you so much, Maura. So what I would like to speak about for 2 seconds is what you should buy. Because, there are all sorts of things that you can buy in real estate, right? Should you buy a home or should you buy a condo? So Maryellen right now is working with a condo buyer. And she's learned so much. She's even teaching the company about everything that she's been learning. Do you want to take it from there?
And you know very well, Maura, what I've been going through.
I do. Virtual hug. Here you go.
It was definitely a learning process. And I guess the one thing that I learned from Maura was it's easiest to buy a 4-unit condominium, because the 4-unit condominium doesn't require the questionnaire that the condo association needs to complete in order to be able to get financing on the building. Is that right, Maura?
So, and when Maryellen says that, I want to clarify, because we've talked about some multi-units. You're going to buy 1 unit, a condo complex where the full complex has 4 units or less, where there's a lot of them in Philadelphia. So we have the 1 to 4 units follow completely different rules than everything else, because I think you bumped into a lot of non-warrantable condos.
And that's a whole other story. But I think basically we just need to know that a condo can be a good investment but they may come with some financial restrictions based on guidelines of that questionnaire.
Yeah. And you've got to think that a condo is generally one portion of a building and the other portions are the same. So when you're going to go and sell it, will it appreciate as much as a house that is completely unique? The condo is just like all the other ones. But as I was explaining to Maryellen and Karen earlier, I have a client right now who is far from retiring, but she told me right now I have the money to buy a great condo that I would be able to go to when I'm ready to retire. That will be living on one floor, an elevator, there will be a concierge, but I may not be able to afford, or maybe I won't be able to get the loan when I'm not working anymore to buy that condo that I really want. So it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Like right now we're talking about something and you're like 22 years old, Adam, and but maybe one day you will think, oh, maybe now is the time to buy a condo. Maybe. So we've talked about how you finance it. We've thought about what you could buy, whether you should buy a home or a condo or a multifamily. And I would say, if I had to start my real estate investment life all over again, I think I would have started with a multifamily. But nobody told me then. So the most important part, I think, when you decide that you're going to go into investing, really, is you need to make sure that you have all the right people helping you, like the right accountant that knows all the, all the tricks of the trade, so that you take full advantage of owning an investment or multiple investment properties, but also the people that will help you when you get the phone call on New Year's Eve because the garbage disposal is not working or the toilet is plugged. You need to have your cell phone and you go click, I'm going to call Ryan. Ryan, can you go and take care of that toilet? And then when you do become an investor, there are lots of groups that you can join, that you can take advantage of, where you can get rebates on a lot of products out there. So make sure that when you start buying your first investment property, you surround yourself with the right people. Now, one thing that I wanted Karen to speak about is Sophia wants me to speak about how do you make money. Well, as I was explaining to you earlier, it does take money to make money. You need to have saved a little bit of equity in your property to be able to buy the next one. And you need to look at the opportunities, whether maybe for your very first property, you will need to refi because the interest rates have gone down tremendously and you can pull some money out. So yes, to make money, it does take money. But as I showed you, with just my 4 properties, which is not that many properties, I'm able now to make money. That's how I make the money. I mean, besides my job, of course. So I wanted Karen to touch on the tax ramification of purchasing a property. There we go. So Karen, do you want to speak about this? Because it's a little complicated, but it's totally worth understanding.
Yes, this is a good example of why you need a good team, including an accountant.
Yeah.
Like Cecile's touched on leverage, cash flow, appreciation. Those are all advantages, but another advantage is the tax advantage. Rental income that you get from your properties is taxed at the same amount as your regular income from whatever source. However, what's different about rental properties is that you can offset that income by deductions. Like on a rental property, you actually take the income and you subtract, at the end of the year, all of the income, and you subtract the real estate taxes, mortgage interest, any repairs you have to do, the home insurance, if you have somebody manage the property, that fee, and another one, a big one, is depreciation, which is a percentage of the value of the building. And there's a formula for that the accountant knows. And then another big advantage is that when you sell an investment properties, in this current with these current tax laws, that gain is taxed at a capital gains rate, which is less than your income tax rate. So that's a good thing. But the other thing you can do, there's something called a 1031 exchange, where you can actually take a property that's gained in value and you can sell that property, but roll that appreciation into a new property that's maybe a more expensive property and not pay tax on it until the whatever the ending property is sold. And that's a big advantage as well. So once again, you need a good accountant.
Yeah. So what Karen is describing of the 1031, it's like deferring paying your taxes.
Right.
And I have a client right now. It's actually the client that is looking to purchase a condo for when she will be retiring. She owns lots of properties. She's a single woman, and I don't even know how many properties she owns. And she owns land. She owns multi-families. She's been really smart about the way she's done this. And I can remember when she started, we were neighbors, and her brother is a mortgage person in Cincinnati, I think. She has 4 siblings, and just to buy her first 2 investment properties, she was borrowing from the siblings just to have enough. And now she owns so much. And so her goal, she's a single woman, she's got nieces and nephews, is to give the properties at the end to her nieces and nephews.
No.
And so what she is doing is when a property in a neighborhood is not going to appreciate that much more, she does a 1031 exchange. She sells the one in the neighborhood where it cannot accrue that much more, and she buys a property for a similar amount in a different neighborhood that is now going to grow much more.
So the 1031 applies only to investment properties, right? Because you don't pay capital gains on your primary residence when you sell. Okay.
Yeah. And there are companies that are specialized in doing all the paperwork for you. It's about $1,000. And I have not done it personally, but I know for this woman, I've done it for her, but not for me, for my personal properties. Because my goal right now is just to hold on, if I can. So
a couple of comments is like my father was very, very successful in, he had rental properties for many years, and he managed to live on his retirement income from his rental properties for about 30 years.
And I think this is going to become the truth even more, because although we're going to be working later and later in our lives, I mean, we see that the age of retirement is like getting pushed and pushed and pushed, but there is a point where you can't get somebody to keep on working if they can't walk. But we're not going to be able to walk, but we're still going to be alive, and we're still going to need to eat and live someplace. And to me, it feels like, real estate is the solution. I diversify. I have some money in the stock market, but I see real estate investment as being part of that entire package that I will need to be able to send my kid to college, but mostly retire later on down the road. So I think that's about like the extent of what I wanted us to speak about. Of course, and that could be like a session all by itself. You know, when you become a landlord, there are lots of skills that you learn you didn't know you had in you, such as you become the babysitter of your tenants. You know, when you get like 2 tenants and they're not from the same family and they start to bicker and you have to come in the middle, or you learn all sorts of things. But that's a totally different story. I don't want to scare you of buying an investment property quite yet.
Yeah.
So do you have other questions?
Right. So one question is around, and I don't know that, as you say, I think it might be a different webinar, but right, thinking about managing a property, especially from afar, if you're not physically there, and as you say, having contractors that you trust, are there other options? I know it's obviously for someone who owns a lot of properties, then you have your own kind of property management infrastructure, but for someone who might own one or two properties, how do those people, if they're living somewhere else, how do they go about managing those properties?
So actually, most real estate agencies have a department that will do a portion of your management, and then you have some property management companies, and that's all they do. And the way you hire them can be, you pay them to find the tenant, you hire them to find the tenant and manage your property, or you hire them just to manage the property. So that's a solution. I mean, like when we were working at Plummer and Associate, there was an entire side of the building that only dealt with that, because there's a lot. I mean, you've got to make sure that they pay the water. Like you've got to pass on the bill of the water to the tenants. You need to make sure that they pay the right amount every month, and then you've got to take all the calls with all the issues. And I mean, I'm not going to get into the issues.
But people do that, Adam, for one unit. You don't have to own multiple units. You can own one unit and hire a property management company. It's just, and you pay them for however many per places you have.
And people probably, you peg it at like 10% of the rent. Is that kind of the?
It's typically 7%.
7 to 10, really, 7 to 10%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I see that David is asking 203K question, but I don't know what the question is. But if the question is what is a 203K?
No. So before I get there, I have a client that does remote management by turning the entire home over to technology. So keyless entry and lights and everything. All cameras are all done that way. So my 203K question is, if, for example, if I buy a shell or a shell or a triplex shell cash, does the 203K does that go against my credit, or does it use the equity of the ARV of the triplex or the property to justify the loan?
Maura, do you know the answer to this?
So if you're doing a 203K loan, it is in a person's name. It's not in a LLC or something like that. Is that what you're stating?
Yes. All right. So for example, I pay cash, but I don't have the income to justify the 203K loan. Can I use the equity of the home that's the shell?
Yeah, so 203K is an FHA product, and you're definitely going to get stuck at that that debt to income parameter. However, let's say you have to have the income, you have to show the income to pay back, or somebody who's on the loan does. But if you pay cash for the house originally, what happens with the 203K is that's going to sort of get lumped in because you've got a value for what you've bought there. And then what they're going to do is they're going to look at the after value. So you're going to get together all the specs and the plans and that sort of thing. And they'll say the after value is this. So you could actually go into this and not put any additional money into the project if you've paid cash for it, because that's going to give you a decent amount of equity. They're going to look at sort of that after piece. They're going to lump the land part in that you've purchased, but you are going to get stuck on a debt to income ratio for the actual person because it's an FHA product.
Got you. Thank you.
You would have to look at a commercial type product to do that, where they're looking at the revenue from the building per se, if there's renters already in there, and look at it that way. I think that's going to be more of a commercial type loan.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question, Maura. I thought a 203K was, for example, if you buy a property that's a total shell and it's $100,000, and then you want to finance another $50,000 for the renovations.
Yes.
So then you get a 203K and you get 80% financing of the $150,000. Is that correct?
So 203K, right, is a renovation loan, right? So you're renovating.
So
Now,
you purchase and then renovate.
well,
at the same time.
you can do it all at the same time. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of renovation products. There's conforming ones as well. I mean, we always say 203K, but I have a partner who does all renovation loans, and usually I will connect a client. And Adam, I think you spoke with Midge, and we say, hey, what's the right program? Because there's home style, which is conforming. There's 203K, and it depends upon what the client wants to do. But it is a renovation. We don't care what the value is today when you buy the property. We don't
It's
care
after.
if things work, if it's habitable. We're looking at the after value. So what has to happen is at the purchase, you're coming to the table with your specs and plans.
Right.
Is this going to be afterwards? And everything is based on the after value and trickles down from the down payment. And well, I apologize. If you're not doing it a two-step, the down payment would be on what you're paying for, but then you're adding in the construction costs. But everything from a valuation perspective is looking at that after value. It doesn't have to come in at 80%.
Okay.
Like you're saying 80%, it doesn't have to come in at 80% after, but there's different programs that have different parameters as to what that loan to value has to be.
Okay. So there are many different types of construction rehab loans out there.
Yeah, a whole other full hour seminar we can do.
Yeah,
Got it.
Totally.
I didn't know that either.
yeah. But I gotta tell you, it's a great product to start in life. It really is.
Yeah.
You know, if
Yeah.
you don't have
Now, the other thing for somebody, one of the things that we mentioned, and I know Cecile had talked about, she feels like it's a great idea to buy a multi-unit, live in one of the units to get this whole thing going. What we call a little trick up the sleeve when we say, hey, we don't have a ton of money to put into this. I really feel the need to mention the FHA loan, because they don't treat the multi-unit like the conforming does with these large down payments now. So for an FHA loan, you can do a 4-unit property and put 3.5% down if you're going to live in one of the units.
Can you believe it? I mean, oof.
And what is the limit for the FHA loan now, Maura?
So in our area, it's about like 393 or something like that, in the 393 range.
That's the loan amount.
That's the loan amount, not the sale.
Okay.
That's the loan amount, right, for our 5-county area. But, so 1 to 4 units, I looked at it today. I looked up some pricing, knowing it might come up about a 3.5% interest rate. You could do, 3.5% down, about a 4.25% interest rate. That's the thing. The interest rate's a little bit higher. The PMI was about $200 a month on like a 3-unit, 380 purchase price. So that's a great way to get your foot in.
Yeah.
3.5% down on a 3-unit property. That's amazing.
Right.
But you live in one of the units because FHA doesn't do investment properties. So one has to be owner occupied. You live in it for at least a year.
Gotcha.
That's awesome.
Like 2 friends that get together, because it's a lot of money when you're starting.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Was this helpful at all?
I thought it was great. No, this is super useful, honestly. A lot of great information, and it's just like reinvigorating, as soon as I'm ready to do the next one. This is super helpful. So thank you all so much.